Welcome to Rune Soup, a weekly podcast about magic, culture, and the paranormal. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. This week we are speaking to ghost hunting's most dynamic duo, Dana Matthews and Greg Newkirk. Greg and Dana have almost 4 decades combined experience in paranormal investigation and are the proprietors of the world's only traveling museum of the paranormal and the occult. One quick note before we begin. I recorded this chat from Hobart, Tasmania, so there are 1 or 2 audio wobbles on my end rather than the guest end. But other than that, it is an absolutely fantastic conversation, so listen along and enjoy. Newkirks, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having us.
I'm looking forward to this. I like when we get when there's 2 people at once because the traditional first question, I can't decide who to go with first. So I'm going to say, Dana, were you a weird kid?
Yes. I was definitely a weird kid. And I'm still a weird kid. So there's pretty much, I'm not growing out of this phase, I guess.
All right. What kind of specific weird?
I mean, well, from a small age, I was sort of obsessed with ghosts and all things paranormal. And so, I would always be trying to get my friends to go to weird places, and most of them thought I was insane. So, that's pretty much the origin of my interest in the paranormal. It really goes all the way back to kind of being like a little kid watching too much Unsolved Mysteries. Right. So did you grow up somewhere where there were lots of abandoned amusement parks and mental hospitals and things? Were you legitimately insane? Unfortunately, I didn't. I actually grew up in the suburbs, which makes for really crappy ghost hunting because there's really nothing abandoned and nothing has been around for very long. Unfortunately, Greg, on the other hand, grew up in an awesome situation for all that kind of stuff. So I've always been a bit jealous.
Care to jump in there, Greg?
Yeah, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and I cut my teeth in these really crazy abandoned cemeteries and abandoned houses, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that people just kind of up and left. And so while Dana was creeping city cemeteries, I was up in the mountains looking at old mining towns and things that people hadn't stepped foot in a long time.
So do you have a memory of the first time as a kid you were, potentially trespassing and you realized there was something to this?
God, one of the first times that we'd ever gone ghost hunting as kids, we were actually we were kind of role playing like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a bunch of 11, 12-year-olds slumber party going to the cemetery across the street, and we'd had a friend there who was hanging out, who was there ready to scare all of us, and he was an older kid, so he had an older brother with wheels and stuff, and he was waiting in the cemetery for us, scared the living crap out of friends of ours that didn't know anything was going on. But then weird things started happening that weren't set up. People were getting tapped on the shoulder, or we were getting weird voices on recorders, and we didn't realize it, but we were actually ghost hunting. And after that, we didn't need anybody to hide anymore. We were kind of on fire after that. Everywhere we could go that looked like it might have a ghost, it might be haunted, we were there.
And what about you, Dana? Because as you did mention, the thing about the suburbs is not even ghosts will haunt them. So what was it for you?
Unfortunately, you have 2 options. You either have to ask permission, which doesn't always gain you access, or you have to do a lot of investigating of cemeteries. So some of my first memories are kind of those classic Scooby-Doo sort of traipsing around in cemeteries, getting chased around by security guards kind of things. But asking permission does get you into a lot of pretty interesting places. So once we realized that, people were kind of interested in that kind of stuff, if you contacted them and let them know, we've heard stories that there are ghosts there. Can we come in and check them out? And most of the time, people were pretty open with the idea of having us come in and actually investigate.
Well, that was before television.
That was, yes, again.
That was like, what, 2002?
And also,
yes, this was.
Yeah. Also, it's a bit adorable if you get these, this pack of kids ringing up looking for ghosts. You go, "Aw, yes, okay."
Exactly. They were just humoring us. Is pretty much what I've realized now.
Doesn't work so well anymore. We're a little worse for the wear these days.
Well, was there? And this is either of you can jump in on this because I went both answers. So from a fairly early age, this interest was there and you acted on this interest, was there ever really, did you conceive of it to be more of an embarrassing hobby, or at some stage did you think, you know what, this could be an embarrassing career?
I never was embarrassed by it.
Yeah, me neither. It's funny to describe it that way. Me neither. I just fly that freak flag, Greg.
It's funny because today, Dana and I, we introduce ourselves as professional weirdos because we really do. I mean, we do this for a living, and I never would have guessed. As a 12-year-old kid, trying not to fall through floorboards in abandoned houses, I never thought I would be in a position where I could do what I was doing then, with several years of training behind me for a living. So I'm thrilled. Never would have guessed. I think there's very few people who can say that they hunt monsters for a living. Yeah, and
I agree. I think, and the same thing with me, that I don't think I was ever really embarrassed about it. And I think more than anything, what I found was that if I did meet someone who was sort of like, oh, that's dumb, I'd be like, well, why don't you come along with us? And when they did and had an experience, they were like, okay, I totally get this. So really, for the most part, it was just kind of converting people along the way.
Well, funnily enough, I went into, I have a question. Well, I have a scenario that I pose to guests in similar fields to yours, which is this hypothetical barbecue, which by now is very interesting because I have a lot of previous guests in my head at this hypothetical barbecue. But you guys are there, and there is someone at the table when it's like, and what are you two, Greg and Dana? And you explain. And then they're a bit, So you think that stuff is real? What is your go-to anecdote for that person at the barbecue?
I think the hardest thing when we encounter people like that, which happens all the time, when we encounter people like that, it's really just a matter of getting to the bottom of why they don't believe. And if you can figure out why they don't believe or what kind of preconceived notions, it's kind of easier to tackle that. So I think a lot of the way that we get through to people is we don't look like crazy people, I guess is a good way to put it, because we're fairly clean cut, fairly normal looking, 30 somethings. And I think people are often surprised when they find out what we do for a living. So that helps break the ice a little bit there. And then when you start to go into why we do what we do and how we do what we do, whether it's, the idea that, people sometimes haunt their own houses. And one of the things that we hear all the time is, well, ghosts are all in your head. I believe that. I really do think that's true. But I don't think it's quite the same way that a skeptic would believe. So I think that ghosts need to be in our heads. They need to speak to us and work through us because they understand us. They understand how our body works. And so I think that going at it from that kind of like a psychological perspective and being able to explain, well, yes, a Ouija board works because of, the ideomotor response, but that's because a ghost needs to use you because they don't have another way to contact. That type of thing, I think, makes it a little easier to swallow for people who are, not believers.
And just this occurred to me as you were describing that. Did you both come from families that were reasonably sympathetic to these sorts of pursuits? Do you have, a fortune-telling grandmothers and that kind of thing?
God, no. Dana has a pretty sympathetic family.
Yeah, most of my family members are totally on board with it, but Greg's on the other hand, not so much.
My dad's a Baptist minister.
Okay.
So it was tough. We used to have people leave our church because, their son was dabbling in the occult and my dad wouldn't really do anything about it. So, he was, as far as Baptist minister dads go, he was pretty cool. And he eventually got to the point where he's like, listen, I know I'm not going to make an impact and you're not going to stop doing this. So at least, just try and do it on the DL as long as you can. Stop giving interviews to the newspaper, please, is what he said.
Right, and don't drive around in the Addams Family car from the cartoon.
No, I had like an 82 Dodge Ram panel van, so it was pretty easy to tell when you saw that thing parked outside of an abandoned house. You knew what was going on.
Yeah, and vans anyway are already suspect. So I could see why your dad thought you were bad for business.
This one was really suspect.
So, I mean, that's an interesting kind of segue into it. Why a traveling paranormal museum? Was it the money or the prestige?
Oh, if only either.
It was actually by accident, really.
Yeah.
We were asked to speak at a convention here in Kentucky, actually, a few years ago, probably about four years ago. And they offered us a table, and we didn't really have anything to sell. So we thought it might be interesting to bring some of the weird things we had collected over the years, a majority of them kind of from our own investigations. And it went over so well that we thought, okay, well, this is kind of cool. Let's keep doing this. And we kind of just kept doing this. And as we did, people started bringing us things and sending us things. So it really kind of just happened completely by accident.
And we knew we were onto something when, half a dozen things on a table and people were just continued to come up and ask questions. And we realized, well, there's really only a handful of paranormal museums in America, and a lot of them are situated on the East Coast. I know there's a new one in Vegas, but even with those, it's really hard for people to get to them, and they don't let people handle the stuff. And our big thing is we don't just put it on a dusty shelf. We really want people to have an experience with these things. They can help us they'll tell us, well, I had this feeling while I was holding it, or it did this while I was holding it, or I took this. We let people investigate with the artifacts. They captured this piece of evidence or this. And so we realized that there's nowhere doing that. And we are in a unique position where we can actually travel to people. So people who might not have the opportunity to go to a paranormal museum, we can come to them. And when we realized that doesn't exist, we thought, well, that's a really cool way to, make an impact.
Nice one. Well, you mentioned a few artifacts that you had to sort of start with, so we might wind the clock back a bit and say, were they artifacts that you had collected individually before you guys met? And follow-up question, how did you guys meet?
Well, we definitely were collecting stuff before we ever met. One of the very first things that I ever collected was a piece of coal from an old mining cemetery that was tossed at me. I was probably 13, 14 years old, and this thing, slapped me right in the back of the neck. And I've kept it ever since. And
one of the things that we still travel around with today is a doll. Her name is Ruby, and she came from a family friend of mine. And the family kind of had this superstition that if you were in possession of her, your kids would get sick or you would have kind of chronic illness. And it's one of the items that we actually still travel around with today. Pretty much every single time we go somewhere, she's with us.
So yeah, we've been collecting stuff for quite a long time.
And so when did you guys meet? Because if you had parallel paths and when you did, my first thought, if I were either of you, would have been, are you actually a ghost? Are you fucking with me right now?
Oh, it's even better than that. We ran rival ghost hunting websites on GeoCities when we were kids.
Yes.
And
GeoCities, that tells you the time period.
And we eventually kind of became like a brother-sister group until Dana and her friends got a TV show in Canada. And then we were all a bunch of really jealous boys who were really upset about it. And then we ended up hating each other for like 7 years. It was bad.
It's a Romeo and Juliet story for the ages.
Pretty much.
And then I felt really bad, and I tried to send her some emails and apologize to her, and she wasn't returning my emails. So I did what any sane person would do, and I printed off pictures of them from the internet, drove to where I knew they used to live like 7 years before, and then just started walking around the town. Well, I'd say town, but it was a city. It's actually the second largest city in Ontario. And I just started showing people pictures and saying, do you know these guys? Do you know these guys?
Like a true creepy,
creepy
stalker.
Yeah.
But hey,
now we're
work.
married.
What's the opening of that? Like, have you seen this bitch who took my future? Any of you?
Well, to give you an idea, when we met that day, Greg brought some friends with him, and it was a lot of my friends from kind of that time period of ghost hunting. But we definitely didn't tell him where we lived.
No.
So
They made us come off like 3 blocks from where they actually lived, which is smart.
Yeah,
I get it.
I suppose like that would be how you would approach a situation if you have been ghost hunting since you were a kid. It's like, well, if I can find ghosts, I'm sure I can find this Canadian.
Mhm.
Hey, I did it in 45 minutes.
Well,
That's not bad. That's not bad.
um,
And look at where we are today.
no, yeah, that's. I knew there had to be something in there because it's fascinating to find someone that you can share a very singular career path with.
It's true.
Just really enable each other is what the bottom line is.
Pretty much.
Is the Greg, is the coal still in the exhibit? That's interesting to me. We in the premium members course, we've just finished up sort of history of the grimoires, and Michael Sellis in the 11th century sort of categorized different demons, and a bunch of people went on to use this system that Sellis had written, including Giordano Bruno, and he also included an anecdote of having this kind of demon that does things like throw rocks at you when you're walking through a cemetery, which happened to him. So that just seemed really interesting that you have that as one of your earlier objects.
I've got it. I mean, it's actually sitting on a shelf right behind me right now, but we don't typically tour with it just because, people
it is
don't.
Also a piece of coal.
Oh, it's a piece of coal. They don't think it's that cool.
$15,
I think it's
please.
great.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. But yeah, I've saved it. I've actually got like 4 or 5 little pieces that were all like, one of them was thrown at me, another one was tossed at another one of my friends. Yeah, and I'm a notorious hoarder, so I have all that stuff.
And I mean, this because I want to talk about some of the objects eventually, but I guess before we get to that, what even is the paranormal?
I think that's a great question that everyone's trying to answer. I think that the paranormal, as broadly as you can define it, is just something that doesn't act the way we think it should. Something that exists that maybe shouldn't exist. So anything from Bigfoot to a UFO to a ghost, psychic phenomena, I think all of that falls under the umbrella of the paranormal, even if people just think that is just ghosts these days.
That's a pretty good answer.
Well, let's widen it out. When you say things that should and shouldn't exist, where are the boundaries around that? The word paranormal, I've had Dr. Jeff Kripal on, and his most recent book is The Supernatural, with a space in the middle, because if you kind of need a metaphysics that allows for these things. I mean, he co-wrote that with Whitley Strieber, so a lot of it is to do with UFO experiences.
Right.
But he called it the supernatural because you have these words like supernatural and paranormal that essentially fall out of like this 19th century materialist belief system. So I guess if we want to zero in on when you say what should and shouldn't and kind of go at the question again, like what even is it? Because when you sit and think of the words, you go, well, people know what I mean by it, but I don't know if it's a very good term.
I think that's actually a great way to put it because, again, like I said, most people just think they hear the word paranormal and they think, that means like ghosts. But it's so much broader. You can apply that to anything that is out of the norm. And I mean, it's anything from, and when I say things that shouldn't exist, I mean like in the popular opinion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, I think, even people who do believe in something strange, they don't think that stuff is supposed to exist. They don't think that there are ghosts wandering around or there are UFOs in the sky. I think that it's the word paranormal is not really the greatest identifier because it is so broad, which I think is why a lot of people now have kind of just relegated that to meaning ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because when I talked to Dr. Dean Radin, he says it's the same problem with parapsychology. You have this sort of paranormal means beside normal, and you go, well,
yeah.
I don't know if these things have a reality to them, and obviously they do. As to any further elucidation on that statement is very difficult. they're probably, like, as Dr. Kreipel says, we're embedded in their world. They're not embedded in ours. And in which case, we're actually the paranormal. They're the normal.
But that's a hard thing to explain to someone, especially when their worldview has been shaped by, it could be anything from popular culture to the church, religion. Their worldview is shaped in such a way that they don't think that stuff exists. But, I think we all know that if you just get someone to start looking a little deeper, they'll start to see that things are so much bigger and stranger than what we're taught to believe initially.
And is this the sort of subtextual goal, other than, really sticking it to your dad, in having the traveling paranormal museum? Like, is it to, shake people into a more interesting world?
Yeah, I mean, I think for instance, one of the lectures that we give is really, it's about the objects, but and some of the objects that we do have can kind of, at first glance be a bit scary, but really the whole point of it is to, at the end of the day, have people realize that making these kind of quick judgment decisions about things doesn't really give you any room to actually investigate them. And really, at the end of the day, that's really what we want. We want people to kind of be open, as strange as this sounds, to the actual investigation itself, because more often than not, they're kind of ready to go, nope, it's a demon. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Well, on that same note, actually, to back up a minute, there is kind of a twofold goal with what we're doing. One of them is to show people who might not believe in the paranormal, might not believe that haunted objects exist, to show them that, yeah, this stuff is real, and you might have an interaction with this that will convince you that that's real. But on the same token, a lot of the events that we do are at paranormal conferences where everyone there is already predisposed to believing, but they believe in a very specific way. And I think that has to do a lot with the media, and it has to do a lot with, kind of our precursors when it comes to investigation.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the most famous haunted object is probably Annabelle.
Right.
Which kind of shapes people's ideas about what haunted dolls are or haunted objects themselves. And that's kind of the way that most people approach it.
A lot of people who, they think they hear of a haunted object and immediately they go, well, it's got to be a demon. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people who've come before us who've been investigating, like, the Ed and Lorraine Warren are a great example. They approached everything from a very hardcore Catholic perspective, where everything was, if it was an inhuman spirit, it was a demon, and it was there to, lead you astray and steal your mortal soul, kill you, whatever. A lot of the things that we deal with in the museum, a lot of the artifacts, they can come across as very scary if you've never dealt with anything like that before. And so a lot of the people we're talking to, their initial gut reaction is, oh, it's a demon, it's evil. But when we can show them how we've worked with these artifacts and how we've learned from them, we can make them think differently about not just artifacts, but the paranormal in general. So they'll be able to go, well, wait a second, why am I afraid of this? I'm afraid of this because it's strange to me and I didn't expect it to react that way. So now that I know that, I can approach it from a place of curiosity instead of fear. And maybe I'll get to understand what's going on and it'll broaden my horizons a bit. So we're always ready to try and make a skeptic a believer. But at the same time, most of the people we come in contact to are believers already. We just want them to believe more broadly.
Gotcha. For people who maybe don't, because this is a good lead-in to some subsequent questions, if you want to briefly describe the Annabelle story for people who aren't aware, or just describe, because I think you've landed on something that I really do want to talk about, which is that increasing nuance in paranormal discourse. But we'll start there so that we've teed it up nicely.
Well, if people haven't seen the Conjuring spinoff about the doll, Annabelle was a doll that was collected by Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were very famous American ghost hunters back in the day. And they came at it from a very Catholic perspective. So they believed that this doll was possessed by a demon, which made it, they claim that it's killed people and it caused all kinds of terrible problems. problems for them. It would write notes to people that were threatening them, and it's a Raggedy Ann doll. It's this old Raggedy Ann doll. So it's already,
and it's been in a case pretty much since the 70s, I think. And has not been taken out, at least not.
There's a big sign that hangs on it in the Warren Museum that says, whatever you do not open this, do not touch it. And, they claim that a man who mocked it was killed on his motorcycle on the way home, yada, yada, yada. And it's the story. Anyone who really wants to know in depth the story, it's all over the internet, and there's a movie about it now too. And it's just it's very it's kind of Amityville proportion, a typical haunted item, cursed by a demon, scary kind of thing.
It's interesting you bring up the Warrens and those films. One, if you take the films and put them to the side, I actually quite like them. I actually think...
Oh, absolutely.
I think The Conjuring 2 was not at all... not sufficiently close to the Enfield Poltergeist case to be said based on the Enfield Poltergeist case, but it was a excellent film. Like, it was a fantastic thing to watch. But the Warrens... For a number of reasons, I mean, I presume the comparisons get, even if it's mostly in your head, the comparisons between you guys and the Warrens come up fairly often.
Sure.
They are, how shall I put this? Some of their work is, I guess, problematic in retrospect.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
So, like, what are your thoughts on them and, I guess, their impact on the field, such as it is?
I mean, I would be lying if I said that they hadn't influenced the reasons why I started ghost hunting. I mean, after those initial nights in the cemeteries where weird stuff happened, I'd go to the library and I would read, of ghost hunters about Ed and Lorraine. And it's funny because I've told the story a couple times now to some friends who also, are into the same field. And it's bizarre to go back and read Ghost Hunters now as an adult, as opposed to like a 13-year-old kid, and realize, wow, this is actually, it's almost insulting because it's everything is a demon. The kid who was adopted from a Native American reservation was possessed by a demon because of his heritage. The kid who smoked weed was possessed by a demon because it opened a gateway. Dungeons and Dragons, it was a demon. The guy who watched porn, it was a demon. It's super, I think, insulting and not quite, it's not quite appropriate for anyone who's really interested in trying to find answers and trying to better understand the unexplained. So I think the best way to put it is the Warrens were definitely a gateway drug for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if someone really does believe that it's all a demon, I don't think that's very helpful to the paranormal community as a whole. So yes, it's problematic, but yes, I understand that they made a big impact, even on me.
Anything else there, Dana?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with the Warrens is you can't deny that they aren't legendary. They are, and they will consistently be that way. And I think that in the same breath, I can say, I don't necessarily believe in their kind of approach and their conclusions. But at the same time, I've never met Lorraine Warren, but I think that, she's an interesting woman. And I think that the stories that I've heard about them are interesting. I just maybe don't necessarily agree with their approach. Or,
I mean, the other part of it is it does appear that in some cases they were not entirely truthful with what was going on. And I like that's where a lot of this, and funnily enough, I'm going to turn that into a larger question here, because I love The Conjuring too, but I also was an Enfield Poltergeist fan from way back.
Yeah. That must have been maddening.
That burns a little.
Yeah.
Well, I'd seen the first one, right? So I'm like, okay, this is going to be, and it got reasonably well reviewed. So I'm like, I'm actually just going to sit here and watch this kind of monster film, and it's got some good actors in it. I'm gonna roll with it. And in that sense, it was quite pleasant. But there is a component to these phenomena And it almost goes back to your first experience, Greg, where you were saying we were just fucking around and there were kids trying to scare other kids and then real stuff started happening. When there was, around the film, the girl who is now obviously a woman and mother of two, who was at the center of the Enfield poltergeist case, was interviewed by the Telegraph. I was still in London at the time. And she lives on the south coast of England now. And she said, because one of the reasons a paranormal investigator left saying they're making this up was because she did actually lie about a couple of things during the process. The rest of it, she didn't. And she says, I don't actually know why I did that. I still don't know why I did that because the stuff was real, but I lied about a couple of things somewhere in there. Now, that's very difficult to navigate because you have in this field cases of outright fraud going back to the 18th, 19th centuries, traveling museums and so on. And you also have real phenomena that have this kind of inexplicable fraud baked into it. And what are your opinions on that?
That's the I mean, like the Enfield poltergeist case is like a perfect example of that, where it was there were things legitimately strange that were happening that were being witnessed by countless people. I mean, police officers, people who had no reason to lie about it, and yet kind of there are elements of what Janet was doing sort of near the end, which when you take a step back and you look at it from an adult perspective, which is that this young girl was now kind of the center of attention for a lot of people, and if she felt like maybe I have to do a little bit more to keep people around, I don't think that necessarily should, or that people shouldn't necessarily look back on the evidence that was collected by a lot of people who had no reason to lie about it as being something that isn't interesting.
I mean, and that type of thing is always a problem in this community, in this field, is people feel compelled to produce the same exact type of results over and over and over. And I think, as we all know, it doesn't happen. There's no way to reproduce it. You can't that's why it's not real science, is you can't do it in a lab. You can't make it happen over and over and over. You can't snap your fingers and make a ghost appear. And so I think that, there are people who maybe they get some semblance of attention or fame because of some strange thing that's happened to them. And then they feel compelled to maybe try and make that happen again when it doesn't, because they're used to the attention. And I mean, I've seen it happen with tons of different people. It doesn't, unfortunately, it makes people think differently about what sparked the activity and the activity itself. But it doesn't take away from the fact that something was actually happening there. It's tough, and it's tough to weed out. But I think if people pay attention long enough, they can kind of get a feel for, who's stringing them along, and who's actually experiencing something strange.
Is that absolutely, excellent observation. However, when it comes to the lying component to it, is that sufficient? Can you just try and weed out, as you say, the bits that people are lying about? Because there were subsequent, verified or kind of impressive paranormal events in the Enfield poltergeist case after the lies. And it just, I wonder if, and it kind of, going back to that wider metaphysics about what the paranormal is and how we think about these things and have us being embedded in their world, it's not clear to me whether you would have got those initial paranormal effects as a kid if you weren't scared, if you weren't actually put into a state of being scared. And there is if you look at the sort of archetypal form associated with marginal phenomena like this, it's very tricksterish. It always lies. And, and in some ways, there's a ritual component of deception that's required, at least historically, and is associated with these things. And so that I keep coming back to the Enfield poltergeist with this, because she wasn't sure why she did it. But if we think of it as, if we think of the fraud and the deception as being part of the mechanics of greater manifestation, then the fact that she lied can be interpreted as a paranormal event itself.
Well, it's really interesting that you touch on that, because one of the things that we see more than anything else is we think a lot of people I don't think they're doing it consciously, but I think that a lot of the times it's unconscious. They are haunting their own homes, or they're haunting their own objects. Mm-hmm. I would say 85 to 90% of the stuff that people send to us never does anything strange for us. But for those people, they've experienced something with that artifact that is real as real can be. And it's frightening, it's scary. But it's because they've somehow got the idea in their head that it's supposed to be scary, almost as if they've manifested something into that. And a great example of this we've got this thing here in the States. There's crybaby bridges in almost every state, multiple ones. And the legend is always sort of the same. It's that some woman, she threw her baby over the bridge because she couldn't deal with the crying or whatever, and then killed herself, or some variation of that. And these crybaby bridges, they're all over the place. People have been going to them for 50 some years, even though the legend is absolutely totally false. There's no truth to any of these stories. But after 50 years of teenagers driving out to the bridge at night to go look for the white lady or to hear the crying baby, actual activity has started to manifest at these places, and people are able to capture this. They've got EVPs, they've got photographs, multiple witnesses. But it's because all of that repetition that started from a lie has actually manifested real activity. It just took a little while. And I think that happens more often than most people realize.
A good example there, I suppose, would be, something like Slender Man, which is
there you go,
beginning and end. Beginning anyway of like this, and no one at any stage in the process has said anything other than this is a thing the internet made up, and it nevertheless starts to have those results. This kind of comes back to, and I'm going to turn it into a question for you both then, which is how you model the paranormal, a wider or more nuanced view of the paranormal than it's a demon, given that the edges of these phenomena kind of touch on things that we're just exploring here, which is frankly the deception and sometimes outright fraud and lying, but also that alone necessitates a more nuanced view of what's going on, as does, just slightly more credible interpretations than it's all a demon.
Right.
So how do we, what's even going on, Greg and Dana? How do you, we can only describe this?
We can only tell you what we think. And we always, before we ever give a lecture or anything like that, we always preface it by saying, this is what we believe. Mm-hmm. And this is why we believe it. Because obviously the paranormal is open to interpretation. But part of the reason that we want people to think more broadly than just it's a demon. And when we say that, we're really specifically speaking to the Catholic idea of a demon, which is, this guy who works for the dude with the pointy horns, who wants to send your soul to eternal hell. That's what we're speaking to, because that's been really popularized more recently. So I think that the reason that we try and get people to think more broadly about it is because when you immediately go, oh, okay, well, it's a demon. You've hit a brick wall. You've hit a stopping point.
Yeah.
What other studies can you really do? How far can you really take it? Mm-hmm. If you can immediately get past that wall and open yourself up to the possibility that it's something maybe stranger that you haven't anticipated, or something that maybe we can't understand and hasn't been written about properly, you're going to get a little bit further. You're going to make more discoveries. You're going to have more fulfilling interactions with the paranormal.
I think for us, really, the rule is to investigate everything. And I think that it's in the paranormal community, it's easy for a lot of people to kind of stop at certain lines. Like, for instance, ufologists aren't interested in Bigfoot research, and Bigfoot researchers aren't interested in what ghost hunters are doing. And really, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, because what we've realized is, over the past 20 years that we've been doing this, the more that we open ourselves up to different types of paranormal experiences, the more we realize that we actually grow as investigators.
Well, and the more experiences we actually get to have.
Absolutely.
Because we aren't brick walling ourselves into one specific way of thinking. We one of the lectures that we give is we give a lecture about why we think that Bigfoot is a ghost and why we think more paranormal investigators who maybe have only gone ghost hunting should look for Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. Because we've been on a whole bunch of Bigfoot hunts where we've noticed that there's all this crossover activity that really makes this interesting correlation between Bigfoot sightings and ghost sightings and even UFO sightings.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we've been on Bigfoot investigations with, flesh and blood believer, like Bigfoot people who think that he's just an undiscovered ape. And, we've experienced things during those investigations that we've also experienced while we were investigating ghosts, for instance. And to them, their batteries draining or their cameras malfunctioning doesn't necessarily seem strange. But when you can kind of say, yeah, but this is also happening during ghost hunts, so maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe we should look at why these things are happening. The more you kind of open yourself up to potentially kind of dipping your toes in other areas of the paranormal, the more I think that you will grow as an investigator, and also you'll find new answers because you've got a different kind of group of information to kind of attack the
But we would never be in that position to even bring that up had we not decided, well, we've gone ghost hunting, let's go Bigfoot hunting.
Exactly, yeah.
Or, going out and hanging out with people who've been abducted by alien beings and then being like, well, what you're experiencing is actually very close to poltergeist phenomena. The only reason we'd ever get there is because we're constantly trying to broaden our horizons. And we really feel like if more people were doing that and they weren't just going, well, yeah, hunting Bigfoot's crazy, but at least I don't hunt ghosts, we'd maybe all together start getting some more answers.
Sure. So that is an argument. It's a good argument. Moving away from a more 19th century natural history museum kind of pinning the butterfly on the chalkboard idea to a bit more of a, I guess, messy spectrum, which I think is a very useful place to be when looking at the ranges of phenomena. And that's kind of halfway to a metaphysics, because what you've essentially posited there is there is something behind Dr. Kreipel's one-way mirror that is in a process of ongoing uneven interaction with our perceptual environment, which I think is
absolutely,
which I think is fair. How then, and this is obviously a guess, but it's an informed one. How do some objects get haunted and other ones don't?
Well, I think, we think that there's three main ways that this tends to happen. We think that either maybe an artifact or an object of some kind was in some big psychic disturbance or some really traumatic event. And in that case, you get something that's like a residual haunting, where it doesn't seem to be any intelligence attached to it, but maybe on certain dates or in certain places or around certain people, it starts to interact. Or you've got like the classic idea that there's some kind of intelligence that's attached to this item for some reason or other. Maybe it was ritually used over and over and over.
Or maybe grandma just really liked her earrings and wants to stay with them.
And then, there's that kind of third idea, which is the idea of like maybe an intentional haunting, where people have projected so much intent into some object. They've got this creepy porcelain clown that they're convinced it's haunted. And they've convinced their whole family it's haunted. And so every time any of them see this porcelain clown, they're projecting that intent on it. And then it does start to act up, because the mind is a powerful thing and it can do very strange things. And then you've got a haunted object. And oftentimes it's only going to act up for that family because they're the ones putting that intent in it. But in plenty of cases, it'll interact with anyone because they've done it for so long, just like a crybaby bridge. So I think that, and obviously those are just three ways of, I'm sure, countless ways we haven't ever considered. But that's probably why, at least in our opinion, some things are haunted and some things aren't. You don't typically often see, a haunted pen, because people aren't really projecting a whole ton of intent on that.
Is that Because you mentioned earlier Annabelle being the most famous haunted object in history, and I just wanted to be a history nerd on that and go, well, there's the Koh-i-Noor diamond in...
sure.
There's the Ark of the Covenant. Would we consider objects... and this is the question, right? We've just described how everyday objects may somehow haunt and other ones don't. Let's spectrum haunted objects with... objects around history that would fall mostly into this categorization, but not quite. Do you know what I mean? It's not
sure.
It's not grandma hanging around the Ark of the Covenant. But if we're going to try and this is where we sort of move to that. Well, how do I have a coherent worldview that allows me to navigate the reality of these experiences with these objects that I actually have in my possession, and how do I fit that into a wider narrative of, I guess, objects through time?
Well, I mean, if you want to think about something like the Ark of the Covenant, think about all of the people who were projecting the idea that there was the God inside of that thing. There was the Holy Spirit in that thing. And because of that, maybe it was manifesting some type of supernatural activity because there was all of these people who so strongly believed that there was something in it. And I think it works the same way with things that are famously cursed. There's so many people who believe in the curse that they've in effect made that curse a real thing. Or maybe on some subconscious level, they are cursing themselves because they believe they've interacted with a cursed artifact. You see it with the town of Bodie, California. The old ghost town where people take a rock and they're warned not to. It's like posted. There's signs and they say don't take anything because they're supposed to be cursed. It makes you wonder if they didn't know about the curse.
Yeah.
If they would actually be experiencing that type of activity.
Another example that pops into my head is Robert the doll, who's kind of an infamous haunted doll in Key West, in a museum in Key West. And the story behind Robert is that he doesn't like having his photograph taken unless you ask permission. And there are lots of stories about people who've not asked permission and taken photos of him and have had terrible things happen to them. But that's really just kind of recently.
Right.
It's not, for the length of time that Robert's been at this museum, I'm sure that there's been tons and tons and tons of people who have taken pictures of him without his permission. But it wasn't until that piece of information was readily available to the kind of general public, like, oh crap, I need to be asking permission for this.
Right.
That suddenly stories of terrible things started happening.
And I think that you can probably trace that type of thing way, way back in history. I really do think that the majority of hauntings that we deal with are affected by the people who are experiencing the haunting. I think that they are somehow manifesting something. And especially if you can get all those people in a large group. Think about something like the Philip experiment that happened to the Toronto Ghost Club back in the 70s. They actually created a ghost. They all sat down together and they came up with the details of this ghost they wanted to contact. And they made him a reality. They manifested him. He was interacting with them in Ouija board sessions and table tipping sessions, and they were getting information from him. And the craziest thing is it became such a normal thing for them. The only reason they didn't continue the experiment is because they all got bored. That's insane to me. That's crazy. They manifested a ghost and they got bored because it became such a real thing. I think it happens all the time, every day.
Is that, it's good, absolutely, there's a component of that, but is that sufficiently universal, a sort of wider believing makes it so for objects through history? Because I'm just thinking in my head of times, particularly in the practice of magic, where you can use things like dolls or objects on people who are entirely unaware and not even embedded in a culture that is open to this kind of idea, and they will have all people can be impacted by having objects that they subsequently find have a story associated with them. Is that a sufficient universal for something like the Ark of the Covenant? Let me switch it up and say, can objects, and this is almost a leading question for the last topic, but can objects have a destiny prior to this sort of believing makes it so impact of humans? That's where I think it starts to get a bit frayed at the edges.
I think you're right, and I think that's a really tough question to answer, because I realize we've been harping on this idea that people are responsible for a lot of their own hauntings, but again, there's that 10% that's a little stranger, where things that you don't know anything about start to act in a specific manner or a specific way. You could walk in with a blank slate and then start experiencing some strange stuff. And that I don't necessarily believe is because someone has projected something onto that thing. We've interacted with a lot of artifacts that they clearly have a personality. They clearly have like a preference to how they interact and who they interact with. And I think that that's coming from a spookier place than just our minds. So it's a really hard question to answer. And I think that here's the thing. If we knew that it was just people doing it, we'd have given up a long time ago because we'd have already figured it out.
Yeah. And I think that's, we're talking about the first thing, the impact of human consciousness has been, speaking of laboratories, has in fact, its impact on the physical has been observed for 150 years in laboratory settings and so on. As far as I'm concerned, that's settled. As to where that stuff can go, where we're speculating here about, well, this looks like unintended, at least some of the objects, this looks like an unintended impact of these observable effects, right? So that's fine. That said, we now need a metaphysics or a worldview that can accommodate that, which I think is fine, and I think we've had kind of off the shelf for 150 years. What we don't have, and this is the one that really breaks Westerners, is the other objects that appear to have a destiny that is outside of, or a story or mission that is outside that, frankly, comparatively acceptable idea of the impact of human consciousness. And you have to have a worldview that has both of them in it. And what I don't think a lot of people, if they sit with that idea, they probably realize they are their metaphysics are insufficiently nuanced, because that's the big deal. And the reason, it's going to turn into a question in a second, but for the last few years I've been talking about something called big table animism, which is having kind of tiptoed through the various metaphysics over the last 20 years about how to look at the world. The one that appears, I think, intellectually or psychologically, the Westerners have had some kind of head trauma with the Enlightenment and so on, where even as we're talking about objects, there is a sort of intellectual decision about how the universe is structured by using that word rather than person. Animism extends personhood, not humanness, from humans to other things that we call objects. Obviously things in the natural world, but natural formations and storms, and things we call objects, in particular haunted ones. And I wonder if there isn't a conceptual challenge that is structurally more significant than the impact of the human mind that trips people up here, because you get the objects that fall out of the kind of accepted metaphysical decision.
Absolutely. It's tough, because I think a lot of the times, we can use the idea of, human interaction and the human projection on a haunted object as a crutch, because it's a good way of getting people on board with the idea of haunted objects. And that's generally how we start, because it's a little easier to swallow than what we're talking about, which is, like you said, an object that maybe has its own destiny and its own opinions and isn't really influenced much by us. And there's nothing we can do about that. We can't, it's really hard to swallow and understand, especially because, it is by its very definition as paranormal as you can get. It's an object that clearly has its own, like you say, destiny. There's an artifact that we've had now for almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years, yeah.
And it's something, out of everything that we have in our collection, it is the one thing that clearly has shown it makes up its mind about things. We have no idea why it's doing what it's doing, where it originally came from. It's this African idol that was given to us by a man who found it under his house in Dayton, Ohio. And he'd only lived in the house for about 6 months, and he was running new cable, and he finds this thing down there just half buried in the dirt. It'd been down there a very long time, and immediately opens it up, and his whole family starts having terrible nightmares. and there's almost like this weird sort of strange propheticness to these nightmares. And it got to the point where they were getting so disturbing and so scary and had manifested into full-blown poltergeist activity that he wanted to get rid of it. We ended up taking it from him, and we'll do EVP sessions with this thing, and it was only screaming. The only thing that it would do is just these guttural screams in these EVP sessions. And it really scared everyone. It scared us for a little bit. Like, Dana wouldn't handle him for the first year that we had him. I mean, even the fact that I'm calling him subconsciously, you can see where this is going. Now that we've had him for about 3 years, he'll remember people in EVP sessions. He'll speak people's names that he's met before. And it's almost as if he's finding people. Like, there are people who are drawn to him in a very specific manner, and they will start having some strange prophetic dreams. Or, people who are psychic mediums will say, I've never experienced anything like this before. It won't stop talking to me. Mm-hmm. And it chatters so fast. But there's always this weird thing that's happened with it where it's become very clear that it has its own mission.
Yeah.
It has something that it's trying to do. And no matter how we've tried to figure out why this is happening or who could be influencing it, it's increasingly clear there's really no influence on it but itself. We can try and talk to it, but it does its own thing. And it's one of those things where it's really problematic for someone who wants a good answer to it, to know why or how this is happening, because it's clearly coming from a place we don't understand. And I don't know if we will anytime soon.
Well, this is, I think the idea of rather than object or object as person is a bigger mind fuck than human consciousness can have an impact and that impact can be observed psychokinetically. I actually think it's a bigger mind fuck. That's why I wanted to get this conversation there. If people who you speak to will, as you say, generally have a belief system that initially maybe lacks nuance because it's all a demon, and you can kind of break that open and give them one where some of them might be demons, some of them could be other things. What we're looking at here is some sort of interactivity between human consciousness and, for want of a better word, something extra dimensional. And then, and that's fine, right? Because you're sort of just moving the furniture around with that, like into a better arrangement. And then you get these objects / persons. And that, I think, is a bigger mindfuck if people actually sit with the idea.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see how I'm even having a hard time describing the way that we interact with this thing or where this thing could come from, because I don't really think we're capable, at least where we're at right now, of understanding why this is happening or how this is happening. I mean, that's part of the reason that we're as invested as we are and why we've been able to spend as much time as we have trying to figure out where these things that are clearly they're not some kind of a man-made haunt, where they're coming from. And maybe that's why he's reached out to certain people. Maybe Greg and I are just not capable of getting there yet. Maybe he needs to, reach out to someone who's psychic or someone just to kind of like steer the direction. If he's interested at all in explaining.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's the thing.
The screaming statue might think you're dum-dums.
Kind of.
Sure, absolutely.
For sure.
And it certainly feels that way sometimes.
Absolutely.
Is that one of them? I mean, I'm sure you get asked this often, but I wanted to wait until we had this conversation before I asked what I assume is a common question, which is this the kind of object / person that you've had the most reservations about sharing, or are there ones in that kind of Warren sense where you go, oh, they're never coming out to play?
There's very few things that I think we'd ever run across where we'd say, we'll never show them to people, because I think there's value in even the things that are the scariest or the most unsettling. With this statue, who we call Billy because he's an idol. So there's that like joke.
Yeah.
We call him Billy.
This is why he's trying to get away from you. That's not funny enough for him.
Yeah, right. We've asked him about the name several times. See, the thing is, he here's the other interesting thing about him. He won't tell us his real name, no matter how many times we've asked. It's gotten to the point now where it's almost comical, because when we do group sessions with him, inevitably someone will ask, Billy, what's your real name? And now he's to the point where he'll just go Kevin or Phil. Clearly, not a real name.
Or he'll just say no.
He'll just say no.
You get why, don't you, from a magical perspective?
Well, because there's power in the name.
Complete power. This, particularly if it is an African object. So you wouldn't even tell people in Africa who your governing or presiding spirits were, because your enemies can go and talk to them. And so you'll never get it. You'd have to literally get some kind of sorcerer to bind and pull it out of him, because it will, he'll turn to dust before you get it.
Oh yeah, no, he's very clear that he's never going to tell us. He won't even tell us. There's a few things. He won't tell us his name, and he won't tell us where he's from. We can't even. We've taken him to a professor of African studies in San Diego who has a whole museum of African artifacts, and he can't seem to figure out exactly where he's from. We can figure out he's probably a couple hundred years old. He looks West African, but as for the specific tribe that would have made him, no idea of the specific region, because he has all of these weird quirks from different cultures. So,
do you know what kind of wood it is? Was it carved in America?
It looks like ebony. No, I think it was carved in Africa. And there's bits of ivory in the eyes. The eyes are ivory. So it's clearly pretty old, and it's just one solid block of wood that was carved.
And just because I want to run down some of when my grandparents died, they did a lot of sort of early to mid 20th century world traveling, and souvenirs used to be pretty cool.
Oh, sure.
Is this a mid 20th century souvenir?
I think it's probably a little older than that. Mm-hmm. Everyone we've shown it to thinks that it could be, pretty close to 200 years old. So, don't know.
That's a doozy.
I don't know. And it's strange. What was it doing under a house in Dayton, right? It's bizarre. It was bound in burlap and wrapped in twine. So we're not sure if someone was trying to contain something, if they got scared of something they already owned, or maybe somebody put it down there for some other purpose. But somehow Billy ended up in Ohio. And
maybe that's why he's so angry.
I would be too.
Dayton of all places.
Dayton of all places. But he's not so angry anymore. That's the thing. He did start screaming, and he's part of the reason that we try and get people to kind of, break open their original concepts of what could be a demon, because he's now changed in such a way where the effect he's having on people isn't a scary one. It's actually a positive one and a more uplifting one, and he's interacting with people in a different way. And I don't know if that's because he's decided, well, maybe guttural screams aren't doing what I'm trying to do. But if we had been the Warrens, we would have probably put him on a shelf and put a ring of salt around him, and then never let anyone near him. But I think because we've done the opposite, he's changed in a way, or he's at least changed the way he's communicated with us. And it's a really interesting thing to see and show people, especially people who were there at the beginning, who we will see, 2 years down the line, and they'll be like, I cannot believe the difference in this thing now.
So when you say we don't have a way of understanding it, is that modern Westerners, white boy? Because I would agree if that's the case. But what interests me, it seems like, and this is kind of coming back to the big table animism idea, it seems like there is an opportunity to situate principally where we've gone wrong in experiencing and describing the natural world in the last 150 years, sort of from Descartes through scientific materialism to now, and kind of situate and realize we're talking about 11% of the world's population maximum over only the last 50 years. Whereas even in the case of people of European descent, if you wind back, my grandmother would have no problem with this. She was Catholic as the day is long. She would probably err on the Warren side of interpretations, but in a way, that's fine. And so we've only really kind of lost it in the last century or so, and it's a minority of the population. And is there some sense of kind of looking up and around and realizing every other culture for all time has had better ways of conceptualizing these sort of object as person journeys? And is there an opportunity to, and I don't mean it in an appropriative way, but is one of the next steps to kind of look around and go, well, how does the La Paz witches market deal with objects that are kind of a bit too fiery to sell on the stand, and so on?
Absolutely. And the position we're in is an interesting one, because we are speaking to straight up Westerners. I mean, we're talking to Midwesterners. We live in Cincinnati. We live right on the border of Kentucky. So the events that we go to, these are people who the people that we interact with are people who have been raised by paranormal television. Mm-hmm. They're people that have been raised by shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and Paranormal State, which speak to a very Western idea of ghosts and spirits.
And I think also you have to kind of consider that, especially in this country, really since 2004, 2005, when Ghost Hunters kind of came on the air, it really populated the paranormal community from that point on with a type of paranormal investigator who was inspired to do it because what they were seeing on television. And that was kind of what sort of drove them to kind of keep doing it.
And that's not a bad thing.
It's definitely not a bad thing.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
But on the same hand, they're seeing a very simplified version of the idea of the paranormal. And I almost see, while I'm completely on board with the ideas that you're talking about, and I wish there was an easier way for me to tell these to people, I feel like we are the first step on a journey that these people are going to take, because we're exclusively North America at this moment. We occasionally, online, we can reach people overseas, but the places that we visit and debut the museum at, most of them are in the Midwest. We do a lot of them in the Northeast. We started to do more on the West Coast. But they're all still these people who have a very simplified version of the paranormal. Mm-hmm. And part of our, I guess, mission, for lack of a better word, is to be the first step in the widening of their horizons to maybe some ideas that are very, very hard for Westerners to understand.
We're essentially like the gateway drug.
Hopefully. I mean, that is our hope.
That's the goal anyway.
Because it is stranger, and the Western idea of the paranormal and spiritualism is not very well equipped to deal with these things that we don't understand. And I think there is room for that, and there is a better answer. But I don't know is if we're in a good place to provide that for people. I think a lot of those people are going to have to come to that themselves somehow. And if we can help them do that, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know if we're anywhere near answers yet, but it does seem to me, even if it's not, a traveling paranormal museum's destiny, to start having those, to have those conversations with people who are maybe out of the entry hall and into maybe room 2 or 3 when it comes to these experiences, to go, well, how do we situate? And in a funny way, it's a very conservative thing to do, because you sort of go, well, how have other people done it? And how did we used to do it? So it's sort of like cosmically checking the library to see if, are we at fault, or is this object at fault? Right. And it seems like and I don't have this answer yet. I usually get on to how we situate, particularly from a Western magical point of view, how we situate Western magical practice within a global context without it being appropriative, which it was in the 19th century. And the reality is, no one knows yet, but it is the kind of discussion we need to have. And it absolutely overlaps with this, which is, are there better ways of thinking about objects/persons in instances where it does appear they have their own destiny? And I think that's it's kind of food for thought. And
it's, we're always kind of treading this line where it's like, how far can we take it with people who have had they've had no real introduction to this type of thing? How far can we take it with these people before we start to really freak them out and alienate them so much that they close themselves off?
That's exactly it, isn't it? Because you don't want to open with, oh, this is Billy. He won't tell me his real name. When we got him, all he would do is scream. And I think at some stage he's going to go off and do his own thing. That's not like object number one in the experience, right?
Right. You have to ease them in. And it's been an interesting experience because, like Dana said, this all started by accident. It wasn't anything that we had actually ever set out to do. And so we've kind of had to learn, and we're still learning. We're learning all the time. The way that we present things to people and, the way that we try and steer them, it changes all the time because there have been a lot of times where we have maybe led with Billy and people have gone, nope, and just turned around and left. They don't want anything to do with it. So, and the way that we do that will continue to evolve. But it's like you said, it's, you don't want to put someone, you don't want to take them to room 3 before they've hit, room 1. It's tough. It really is tough because those are the questions that I don't even know if we're prepared to help people answer quite yet.
Here's an interesting one. I'll open with an anecdote. And this is sort of like the last question because we're getting back to talking about the museum. When I first moved to London, one of the first things I did, having never been there before, one of the first things I did was visit the British Museum, which I could feel from several blocks away. Because if you're talking about an accumulation of sacred and cursed objects, there is probably no better pile of magic junk in the world, right?
Right.
Have you had an increase in paranormal experiences as the inventory has grown?
Oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, hands down, yes. And I think that we kind of, when we decided to start doing the museum, obviously we, consciously and unconsciously opened that door. And, our home now is a very interesting place to be because there are things going on all the time. And, a lot of it we can, kind of help control and damper. But a lot of it, has resulted in pretty much have to sleep with the TV on now because there's a lot of stuff going on. The cats are always crazy. There's, they won't typically come in the office where a lot of the stuff is stored. There's been a definite increase. And the interesting thing is that there's also been an increase in the amount of really active stuff people feel compelled to give to us. That one we've noticed, especially within the last year, the things that people are giving us are, and I say this all the time. I am psychic as a rock. I do not get impressions from things, but there are some things that people give to us where I just know there's something crazy about it. Like you said, you can feel it coming. So I think once we opened that door, things have changed pretty rapidly, and it kind of, I don't know, it's a bit interesting to see where it's going and where it may be a year from now, considering how things have changed.
Well, yeah, in a big table animism interpretation, a paranormal museum is a person, and it appears to be building itself through time. Like it's, and those paranormal effects I don't expect will ever diminish because there hasn't been this particular configuration of objects ever. So they've brought themselves here. If we go back to the object person destiny idea, they've arranged themselves in this particular configuration around you. That will, for whatever reason, you can't see. But it's interesting to think about, and it is. I think it's a piece in the next step discussion.
Absolutely, and I mean, on a very small scale, there's this, the object that we call Billy. It's very clear now that he is, he's connecting with people that he would not meet if we weren't taking him places. And it's clear that these connections are very important, not just for him, but for the people he's met and the people that he's influenced and likewise. And so, like you said, they're all coming together in a certain place. And, hopefully the purpose for that is wider understanding, or at least a broadening of horizons for everyone that they meet.
Nice. Well, for people who, who would like to learn more about this configuration, or indeed see it in person, Greg and Dana, what do they do? How do they find out about you guys?
The easiest way is they can go to paramuseum.com. We also just started a membership program. If people want to help support the museum, they'll get cool stuff. They'll get access to a lot of evidence files and videos that we don't share with people. They can go to patreon.com/paramuseum.
Splendid. And you guys are also on Twitter and anywhere else in the social homes. This will all be linked up in the show notes, of course, but anywhere else if people want to connect.
Oh yeah, we're pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
you can find us pretty easy on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff.
Nice one. Well, I've been super looking forward to this discussion. I love what you guys are doing, and I've had a splendid time. So thank you very much, Greg and Dana, for this chat.
Oh my God! Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
This was fantastic. It's fun to talk about haunted objects on this type of level, even if it's hard to talk to people who've never experienced a haunted object before on this kind of level.
How'd you like that, then? Ghost hunting, screaming statues, coal throwing, Enfield poltergeists, the Warrens, and slightly creepy Canadian road trips. I really enjoyed the second half of that conversation. It is thought-provoking to consider that the primary ontological challenge with haunted objects is maybe no longer associated with the word haunted, but actually with the word object. If you've been listening along to the premium member weekly video Q&As, this is a subject we return to frequently. Even characterizing an object as inspirited carries with it the presupposition that it was previously empty of spirit or personhood or animation, hence, of course, the word inanimate. Now, that conceptualization is downstream from René Descartes and Cartesianism, and then the 19th century flim-flam cosmology we all know as materialism. I think maybe Greg and Dana have the sequence correct in baby-stepping new interested parties into thinking about the impact of the human mind first, but regular listeners to the show are probably ready to move into the proverbial room 3. There are out there a number of worthwhile anthropologists working to, and I guess we would say, an academic animism, which is very useful to get your head around. But I would say they still almost universally fail to sufficiently haunt their own animism. For this, I think we need to get back to what previous podcast guest Jack Hunter was talking about with Charles Fort, and how Fort considered the sort of paradigm that comes after the scientific one should be considered closer to witchcraft. So definite food for thought there. Good conversations to have, either with the human persons in your life or the non-human ones. Until next time.